work at night.
I'm not supposed to hold this, but I am holding it. Because
It's a lot to it. Real business. So you have you do the maintenance?
Yep. I work on the maintenance side of buttons. Replace ties,
Unless you get it in.
repair and fix. So you're going to distribute call, and if you take these, you have to do the training because everyone here tracks. You need permission.
Yeah, that's how the
everybody.
transfer authority sort of understands the maintenance of way.
I shouldn't hold this because I don't know anybody.
Because of the microphone.
Yeah,
Is it plugged in?
Yeah.
We have to find
do
a...
that. Stop the card. Stop it.
Stop it.
Okay, I don't know.
We can get you a pillow.
Yeah.
There we
right
are.
here.
Come on, that's
Okay.
it.
How's that?
Hey, really relaxed.
Excellent.
How about that?
Robin? Oh, I think she's in the ladies' room. She'll be back.
I
She'll
don't
be
know what I left out, what I repeated.
Okay, well, why don't you start when you were born?
No, this is not about me. This is about the Maddy family.
But
This is
you
about
jumped last
Fanny
night.
and Maddie's
Okay.
family.
Let's start with the
Maddie,
German
Maddie.
Shepherd, Maddie, who is in a kennel
Fanny
in
Parks
San Francisco.
Maddie.
No.
This is about Fanny Parks Maddie
Okay.
from Fairbury, Illinois.
Okay.
Moved
Start there.
to Oskaloosa and married Clint Maddie.
Okay.
And you're all descendants from that. And I would say that after last evening, when I went to bed, I couldn't help but dwell on thinking
I just want to make sure I get the
how
audio.
this is serious. How proud Fanny would be of all of you, of what you've done with your lives, your choice of mates. And it's just, I think she would be very, very proud of you. She worked hard to hold the family together, and she did it, and she would be very, very proud of all of you. I'm just a spokesman, I'm not the Maddy family. But anyway,
Yes, you are.
there are a couple,
Jim, she would
There are
have
a
been
couple-
very proud of you too.
Yes.
couple things that I've thought of that maybe I missed it, kind of little anecdotal things. We had the great pleasure of, when we first moved to Connecticut, to New Jersey, Madison, we had a nice home there, and we had the great pleasure of having 3 of you, who are present here tonight, in fact, as our guests for a summer or 2. We had Janie for quite a while, we had Robin, we had Janie, Robin, let's see who else. Gwen. We had Gwen for a long time. Because she not only came for a summer, but then after she graduated from college, she got a job in New Brunswick, which wasn't far from us, and we saw a lot of her from there. And I can't say enough of how much we enjoyed having it, because by this time, Connie had pretty well grown up and gone away and I think she'd gone to college by this time. And so I needed some new girls, so these girls filled in. And it was great having you. We had a wonderful time. And one ritual we had, and this is the fact, every night before dinner, we always had dinner in the formal dining room at beautiful colonial house. So I did beautiful dinner in that formal dining room. But before dinner, in order to get fed, Jane had to earn her dinner. She'd go to our piano, we had a baby grand piano, and she would play, I don't remember what it was.
It was Wedding at Truckhouse or
Right.
whatever by Grieg.
Grieg.
Yes.
Greg, it was
Greg.
Greg, and it was beautiful. And she played and she got better all summer. And after dinner with dessert, we also had entertainment. Robin recited poetry. Some of it other people, some of it original. That little girl was writing original poetry then. No wonder she made a success of the greeting card business. She was writing, as a little kid, she was writing poetry. So anyway,
that now at home.
that was that was one of the things I don't think I covered last night as far as a little personal aspect here. But we had a great time with you kids. And when Jane, after she finished college and got a job in New York, and Mike and she were dating, we thought, and Mike was at that time
Dating we
kind of
thought.
being a parent to his younger sister and brother, and that little scrawny guy over there, little John, was the little brother, and but he would show up. They had an old Pontiac that I remember. It wasn't so old at the time. But he would show up in Madison
Yes.
to meet Jane, and they would go out. They'd be gone a long time and come in the wee hours, and we, you know, what are those young people doing? What we didn't know is they were married. They had gone off to Maryland and gotten married. So anyway, that was great. And then there we had that great joy. It was kind of having a second family. And I don't know, I guess that was one of the things I wanted to say that I think I kind of maybe missed last night. And when came, but we had some effect in our lives. I think that we were a little sneaky. We, with Gwen, she was engaged and was not particularly looked upon with favor. So decided maybe before she got married, she ought to see a little bit more of the world and maybe a little different view of the world. So Lois and Betty got their heads together, and the thing to do was for Gwen to leave Bussy that summer and come to Chicago, come to New York, to New Jersey, and spend the summer living with us. And we would introduce her to perhaps a different life from the life in Bussy. And she might have a little better perspective on the world. And we did. I think that engagement evaporated. She was, I think, going to drop out of school. Oh, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention was when she left high school, she went first to Iowa State University, which has the engineering school. In her freshman year there, she was Miss Engineer. She was the beauty queen.
Was this in addition to Miss Soybean?
No, I'm not kidding. She was the beauty queen. The queen of the engineers her freshman year. But for some reason or another, she didn't like it there, and she wanted to drop out. She wanted to marry this guy. I don't know who he was. But anyway.
Oh, I know who it was. It was a football player.
It was anyway, that kind of got broken up, and I think that maybe we had a hand in that, showing her a new life in New Jersey with a little bit of the affluence that she hadn't had in Bussy. But anyway, that was the story I'll tell on Gwen. And then after she finished, she went back to school in Missouri, college down there, and got her teaching certificate. Got a job in New Brunswick, and New Brunswick was a very mixed community. And one year she'd been up to see us had dinner with us. So she came up often
Yes.
because it was short.
Remember, you played Santa Claus
I
for
was
my
getting to
second
that.
grader. Okay, don't forget that. It was
Okay,
wonderful.
Well, the story was down. But how long a drive was it from New Brunswick? A half hour or something?
No more.
Wasn't more than that. So she came up quite often.
Driving, it
Because
takes
she
me
was
more.
living down there in very cheap quarters. New Brunswick's a pretty marginal town. So she told me that she had these second graders, and the Christmas coming up, she didn't have a Santa Claus. So I said, we can't have those kids without a Santa Claus. So I went out and bought a Santa Claus suit and went down and played Santa Claus to her second graders. You had about maybe 24 kids, I guess. Maybe half a dozen of them were white Caucasians. The rest of them were Hispanic.
4 or 5.
4 or 5. The rest of them were Hispanic, Negro, and so forth. All little second graders. And I played Santa Claus, and it was so much fun because at that age, some of them were still believers, some of them were non-believers already. Some of them weren't too sure whether I was a real Santa Claus or not. So it was fun, but one thing I'll never forget is the odors from the.
What?
Welcome to my sixth grade class.
I had a ball to give you a clue as to the kind of area this was. When it was over, I took the Santa Claus suit off and I gave it to Gwen, and I said, now Gwen, I'm going to give this to the school, so you'll have it for next year. She said, it'll be stolen before the day is over. So I don't know what happened to my Santa Claus
I
suit,
never
but
saw
I
it
left
again,
it there.
but the kids loved you.
We had a great time. So I thought I was doing Gwen a big favor. So I got her a job. I had some connections up in Westchester County, and I got her into a school up there in the elite of Westchester County. And she went up there to teach then. So I don't know if she can tell you what happened, but for some reason or another, she was not happy. I think she decided that the kids were more sophisticated and knew more about the world. It was the year of the World's Fair in Montreal, and they're coming back and they're telling me, and they're ahead of her, she feels. But I think the real thing is she really didn't feel that she was needed like she was with those underprivileged kids in New Brunswick. So what did she do? She resigned from this position at this fancy school in Westchester County that I worked so hard to get her into, and goes down to Portchester where she can get back to where she has 24 kids, 4 white and the rest of them. That was the compassion.
That was good.
And I'll tell you, these kids will never know what a wonderful thing that was for them. They've had Gwen for a
Miss
teacher.
Lewis.
She really loved those kids,
Actually,
and the
some
more
of them may
desperate
remember
they
you.
were, the more difficult
Second
situation they
graders,
were in,
yeah.
the more time she gave to them.
But
So-
in the meantime, she met her nice Jewish doctor.
Well, I think I
They
told
had
about
two more
that.
teachers.
Did I tell that last night about Gwen invite?
Teachers
They
did,
moved,
didn't learn from her
when she
mistakes,
moved up to Westchester County, with this first school job, she moved up to an apartment building. She had a roommate named Vera. And so she invited us up for dinner. One day, Betty and I up for dinner one Sunday. We went up and we had dinner, and then she said, well, she's going to have this friend this fellow who lives in the building who's a great pianist, come in and play the piano for it. And it was beautiful. It was a beautiful piano recital we heard that day. But she gave us a lot of other malarkey about him. And as we drove home that night, said, well, we don't know what kind of a con job she thinks he's pulling on us, but that's not just a casual friend. So we didn't know what they were up to, but we figured it was far beyond a casual friend. So the first thing you know, they get engaged, they get married, and everything is wonderful. So anyway, and
So John
They-
plays the piano?
Yes,
Why didn't we have him play the piano?
Because he's asleep already.
Well, he actually went to lie down and said, "Wake us up at 9:15," or "Wake me up at 9:15."
It's time.
9:15 now. 9:15, yeah. And I didn't think that.
Didn't
Well,
want to?
I didn't think of that. So.
by the way,
Okay.
and then when
Wake him up.
later years, when we were living in Stanford, out on Chapin Point, and somebody showed some pictures there, just wonderful. Some of Robin's kids were there. I remember taking them fishing. We always had fishing booths. And we had a wonderful
John
time. We had
remembered the
wonderful.
picture when he saw
We
it.
had
Oh,
so
right,
much
John isn't here either, but
wonderful company from family come to visit it. Every place we lived. But anyway,
You can.
John and Gwen didn't live too far away, and they'd come over once in a while. And John was very busy with his practice and so forth. And they drove a Volkswagen convertible. Even after they had the twins, they had this Volkswagen convertible. They come over, and we'd have dinner. And the first thing you know, John disappears. And you go in the other room, it could be in the library alcove or living room or someplace, and he's laying on the floor flat out, sound asleep, like all doctors. He can go to sleep anywhere. Hey, where is John asleep somewhere?
Yeah,
now?
I just woke him up.
Okay, thank you.
So he would always slept through every visit. So we had a great time. But I remember with Billy and Liz, they were the little twins, and I can remember holding one in each hand like that. That's how little they were. And Billy's wrist, that was I was intended there, and I kind of helped try to keep things quiet there too. Anyway, we have great memories. But there's one thing that I will tell you now. I may have told you before, but I'm not sure. But Betty and I were not too happy with you and John. We were not at all sure you were fit parents. We thought we ought to get those twins away from you because you brought in that damn big Airedale dog that we did not trust, and we had visions of that dog just in one bite crushing the life out of one
Was
of the
that
twins.
Samson?
And sure enough, eventually he started biting the mailman. You had to get rid of him. So we were right all along to be concerned about bringing that big Airedale into the house.
So there
That was a stupid thing to do. So
No, he was cooking.
you're lucky you haven't got big dog tooth marks all over you.
I remember saying, "Mommy, Daddy, Samson's smiling at us."
He was licking his chops too, wasn't he? But that was bad. We worried about that. We really sincerely worried about that big Airedale. He wasn't mean looking, but he was just that he was a big dog, and we knew that even in a playful moment, he could easily have maimed or killed one of these tiny babies.
Excellent argument against terriers in general.
So anyway, that's some of the things we went through.
Right.
Noisy the terrier.
He needs his water now.
Oh, it's right here. Sorry.
I was moving it away from the tablet.
Now you're sharing it with me.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Glad you enjoyed.
Oh, it's right.
So anyway, no, it's fine.
Okay.
I was just trying
When
to
you
fill in
first
some
met the
gaps.
Maddies,
Pardon?
tell us about when you first met the Maddy family.
You gotta go back
Again?
to last
Yeah,
night.
you have to do last night over again.
Yeah.
Going back, oh,
What is your first memory of the Maddy family?
my first member of the Maddy family is when I came to Oskaloosa High School in early 1937, the beginning of the second semester of my junior year in high school. I was 15 years old. And we, Fanny Maddy was the high school librarian, and I quickly had to get acquainted with her because I had classes that involved using books or public periodicals, mainly from the library. And where the reason I got to know her especially well was that we had some classes, I think it was Mrs. Smith's speech class was one of them, where she wanted to do things, take articles from Reader's Digest. Well, being sharecropper farmers, we didn't have luxuries like Reader's Digest, or even a daily paper. We had no such thing. So, but the trouble was that I had limited amount because as soon as schools got, I had to get home to get to the work in the field and the chores and stuff. And it was a problem, so I wanted to check a Reader's Digest out and take it home overnight. And Fanny was a stickler for the rules. She was a bureaucrat, an autocrat, and she and her library squad, the girls, the volunteer high school girls that worked in the library squad, they enforced those rules rigidly, and I wasn't about to take a Reader's Digest home unless I stole it, but I was young and innocent, didn't do things like stealing in those days. Today, I would have figured out a way to slip it out, to hell with it, bring it back in the morning, violate the rules. But then I didn't. So I had a devil of a time keeping up classwork if it involved something that I needed to take home, but couldn't. So that's where I met her. But then, my next involvement with the Maddy family, and a really important one, was that as I would arrive in the morning, a few times, as I was walking to school, I walked in from about 3 miles out in the country.
You
And as I was walking, walked. As I would arrive there, I would see this little black 1929 Model A Ford, which I later found belonged to your mother Lois. But it was being driven by this beautiful young girl. And it would stop, and Mrs. Maddy would get out and go into high school. Well, I watched this from early 1937. Then in the fall of 38, I came back, the same thing. Periodically, I'd see this little Model A come up, and this beautiful girl, and Miss May get out of it. And didn't know anything about, but she had already graduated from high school. And so after I graduated in the spring of 38, I was 16. I went to, at that time, all the dating, everything was done was on roller skating rinks. Tents during the summer. And in the fall, they converted a big exhibit hall at the Southern Iowa Fairgrounds at Oskaloosa into a roller rink. And I think it was 40 cents it cost to rent shoe skates and the right to skate.
Skate all night.
All through the evening. And they had canned music that was playing, and mostly waltzes. Blue Hawaii was one of them I remember. It was the most popular that I loved, and it was so romantic. And you'd go there, and you'd have single skates, and you'd have pair skates, and you'd have ladies' choice, and you had all this kind of stuff. And I was pretty shy, never had dating then. And this one night I was there about probably October, November of 38. And I'd probably just turned 17. And I was there, and 3 girls came in. And one of them was that beautiful girl that drove Fanny Maddy to school. So I saw them over there. One of the other was Dorothy West and Virginia Rankin. Virginia Rankin was a second cousin to Betty. And Dorothy West was just a friend, very glamorous. And so I summoned up the courage to go over and ask this girl that I'd been watching for a year and a half for a skate. And much to my pleasant surprise, she accepted. So we skated. We skated a waltz and this and that. So the evening ended. We didn't have a telephone, I don't think, out in the farm, but somehow I got a phone number or something, and I got it, much to my surprise, I got a date with her, and we started dating. This was in the fall of 38, so we dated that fall of 38, and in the 39, and of course, then Peggy was born on New Year's Eve of 1939. And, oh, by the way, that summer of 39, Lois was still working at the library. And I used to see her, we lived out on 92 west of town. And normally she went out to Bussy, out through what the heck is the town right next to Oskaloosa, Beacon. But when the river was high, when the Des Moines River was too high in flood stage, she had to go out 92, clear to Knoxville, circle around, because that's the bridge from between Knoxville and Bussy was the only one that wasn't flooded. So to get across the river, she had to go by us. And I used to wait to watch her go by in that little old Chevy, and because she was important. She was Betty's sister. And so I would watch for her to go by when I knew the bridge was flooded. But anyway, Peggy was born that New Year's Eve, literally on New Year's Eve. And
it was an early tax plan.
Yes, really.
Yeah, tax deduction.
Excellent timing.
Although, Terry, I really don't think that the
I don't think
the
that
Lewis
made-
family had much concern about income taxes
Or
at
much
that point.
control
Or
over that birthday.
deductions.
They did own that little farm, but I don't think it was making much money. So anyway,
Wasn't an issue.
Lois was making a little money at the library. But anyway, the next spring, as I think I told you last night, you want me to repeat this stuff, I guess I have to.
Please.
For the camera.
And, I think it was about March, because I remember it was a real muddy, miserable
Oh,
day.
great memory.
And we had moved, and it'd be time down south of Tumwa, a place called Soap Creek. And Dad was fully into the coal mining business at that time. And I was doing what little farming we were doing, and then also working in the coal mine. And one day, one day I was delivered a letter by special delivery, and it was on foot because it was too muddy. They couldn't get a car through the roads, and it was special delivery. So the post office came through. I kind of wish they hadn't because I was miserable. It was a Dear John letter
From Betty.
from Betty
Ah,
that not to see me anymore. Her mother, she was going to go off to Chicago. Peg was taking care of things, arranging for it over there,
just gonna live with
and
my
they never
mother.
wanted me to darken their door again, sort of thing. It was mean. It was, I shouldn't say mean. It hurt. It was bad.
Yeah.
I was really devastated.
Danny didn't approve.
And
I
I
guess not.
pleaded, but to no avail. When I finally got to a telephone someplace and tried to talk, but to no avail.
Who
So
were
she
you
went off.
speaking to,
Betty
or-
went off
yeah.
to Chicago, moved into Bethany Girls Club, and got a job with an insurance adjuster. And through Lois, I got in touch with her, got an address, started writing, and finally got the response. And when Saturday nights came that spring and summer, I would leave this Soap Creek in this old 35 Ford that had no brakes, no starter, I had to crank it.
But it was
And
flat up there,
boy,
so-
some people
Well,
worry
true.
about my driving. They
Okay.
should have seen what I drove. But anyway, I'd go up to Eddyville and I'd go cross country. I knew a way to get the shortcuts and the back roads to get cross country over to Bussy area to the Lewis farm. And I would sit on the porch with Lois, with little 6-month-old Peggy, and Ben was always inside listening to Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night. And Lois and I would visit and have at a time. And I think that she probably wrote to Betty about these, and every Saturday night, never dated, never
I
dated.
think she did because she told, those were one of the family stories. She
Yeah.
told me how she loved when you came out to
Yeah,
the
'cause
farm
that-
on
that was
Saturday
my,
nights. And
That was, I didn't do it so much, I don't think, I don't remember doing it consciously as a plan, a scheme to get back into Betty's favor, so much as I was just so brokenhearted.
Yeah.
And I still was so goal-oriented, this is the love of my life. And the nearest thing I could get to it was
With an
your mother and
overlay.
Peggy,
But I think Lois
yeah.
had more of
So
a
anyway,
plan.
Something,
Okay, this
something
has gotta
happened
be-
because
The older sister.
before that summer was over, I got Betty to respond to me by letter, and I went over for a couple, 3 days,
And Betty.
and we got reconciled, and so then I went back home, and I had always wanted
When?
to be an accountant ever since I'd had this bookkeeper in high school that Miss Dusenberry, she was a doll. And I resented, they called her old blue hair, it was great. And she, those days,
She had
elderly
to
ladies,
probably.
their hairs were usually blue-gray. And she was a lovely lady, spinster lady, and she was a great teacher in bookkeeping. And I loved it. And my dream was to get enough money. And I did that summer. I got that $180 through working in the coal mine and thrashing and so forth. And AIB, which American Institute of Business, a private little trade school in Des Moines, was where I was headed to try to get to. I knew I couldn't go to university. But once Betty was in Chicago, I had no interest in AIB in Des Moines anymore. I wanted a school like that in Chicago. So after my visit over there, and we were reconciled, she went to work to help identify there were a number of schools, Stratton Business School was, but she gave me literature on these, and the one that seemed the best was Walton School of Commerce. So I got all the literature and got all stuff, and I found out that they had a 40-semester course in accounting and 40-week course rest in accounting, 4 20-week semesters, and it was $152. I'll never forget it for each semester. Well, I had $180, so I spent a few bucks of it on the train to get to Chicago. I planked down $152 at Walton School of Commerce. I paid $6, I remember, for my first week there at the Wabash YMCA, was on South Wabash, and I knew that I couldn't afford that kind of extravagance, except for the first week I was there. I couldn't afford any $6 a week. And I had to eat, so I started pounding the pavement, and I got a job at the Harmony Cafeteria on Wabash, bussing dishes for 2 hours a night. And in return for that, I got $1 worth of food. So
Which
that
was
took
a
care
lot
of
back then.
that took care of my food.
For the day,
Then
each day?
pardon?
$1 dinner per day.
Yeah.
You could eat a
No, I
pretty
had to eat
hefty
it in the
dinner
day.
for
In
75
the day,
cents back
and
then.
I could have it in 2 meals,
Okay.
but I had $1 worth of food credit. But then I had the problem of a place to live, and I couldn't afford $6 a week. So between the YMCA hotel and the school, I walked by Wabash, and there was a LaSalle cafeteria on the corner, and there was a sign there for Wabash Hotel upstairs. So I thought, well, I'm going to check this. So I walked up the stairs on the second floor where the desk was, and I got a room for $2 a week. But it was a third floor walk up with a little cubicle, had a little more than a cot bed, a little table, and a bare bulb hanging down. Toilet facilities at the end of the hall. So that's okay. This is better, and I can manage this maybe. And then I started hunting a job, and I got a job at Goldblatt's, working Saturdays, where I think it was 20 cents an hour, 25 cents an hour. I made a couple bucks every Saturday working at Goldblatt's. So that took care of,
Of your room.
managed to get my room rent paid. And then the manager of the hotel said, he kind of took a liking. There was this hotel thing, it was a funny thing. But I'm not supposed to tell you about the Maddies, not me. But anyway,
You're
I'm
an
into this
important
now.
thing to the Maddy.
Anyway,
Keep talking.
this was on the second floor where the desk was. There were a bunch of rooms. Most of them had old sofas in them and things. And then there was kind of a reading room, and there were permanent residents in this. Most of them were middle-aged and older people who were stock clerks and people down their luck and pensioners and so forth around. But to me, they were the age of my grandparents, probably most of them, their parents at least. And of course, I was a kid. I was 17. No, I wasn't more than that. I was 18 by that time. So anyway, the guy by the name of Ward was the manager of the hotel. And so these people that would sit around that reading room, these permanent residents that lived up on the 3rd and 4th floor there, and they were very nice, and they treated me like they were their son, and they got to know them well. And it wasn't there very long. I didn't pay too many of those $2 a week rents when Ward came to me one day, and I guess he thought I looked honest, and he said, I just lost my night man on Friday nights. Would you like to be night clerk Friday night, 8 to 8, in exchange for your room. No rent, you get the rent free. So I got $2
to
for
stay up
working
all
12
night.
hours. And I went, man, this is beautiful, this is wonderful. I said, sure,
It was
I can do
8
it.
a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yeah,
No. 8
That was
p.m. to 8
Other way
8
a.m.
p.m. to 8
Yeah.
a.m.
Then you had to go right into your Saturday,
Yeah,
third
well,
job
anyway,
Monday, Saturday.
well, I'll get to that one. Anyway,
So you work for your food.
but then
you
I,
work for your
you
rent.
know, I was a naive kid from the country, and I hadn't realized what the situation was until this point when I had got this work job. Then I got to explain how I worked that night. One was that worked 8 to 8, and all the rooms on these floors are for transients. Remember, this is Friday night, and these are transient rooms, no permanent residents on this floor. And if you run out of rooms on Friday night, there were maids living up on the floor, fourth floor living maids. You woke one of those up and had them change the linens in the room so you could rent it again. That gives you a clue. So, sure enough, that's the way it worked. And I was in classes on Thursday. I was in class on Friday day. I had a good night's sleep Thursday night, I hope, because on Friday I was in classes to 4 o'clock. Oh, and then I got another job working at the school after classes from 4 to 5:30, I think it was, cleaning and dusting up janitor work in the classrooms, which I make a couple bucks too, because I had, in 20 weeks, I had to come up with another $152.
Oh, for your next
At this
semester.
point, I had all my living covered, but I didn't have the way to get that other
That
$152.
semester.
So I got this job there. So now I think I got everything made. But the problem was that on Friday, I went to classes, 2 o'clock, and I began my janitor work. And then I had to literally run to the cafeteria to get there by 6, put in my 2 hours there. And then I had a real problem because I had to leave there at 8. And I was
And be there
expected to be
at 8.
at the hotel at 8, and it was 3 or 4 or 5 blocks.
Right.
And I'd run like crazy and get down and run up there. And the day guy was okay. He'd always
He'd
give me
let you
that
come
15
in at
minutes.
5 after 8.
Then I got there, I get there. Then I would be up all night there. Fortunately, I could do some homework and study during the night when it wasn't too busy. And then the next morning, the catch was, I couldn't leave there till 8 o'clock, and I was due at Goldblatt's at 8 o'clock. So again, I had to get off at 8 o'clock and run like hell, literally, to get to Goldblatt's and punch in the time clock, and I always punched in a few minutes late. But I explained to Mr. Murphy, who was the manager of the grocery department where I worked, that what my problem was, and I said, I run as fast as I can, but I'm always going to be a few minutes late. Well, he decided I was a good worker, so that would be all right. Of course, I didn't get paid for that 15 minutes, but
Which was what,
I-
25 cents? Or?
he would accept that. So anyway, so I worked there, and I remember the Goldblatt family, they had one of the brothers, Nathan, had died of cancer. And periodically, they'd have a Nathan Goldblatt Day, they'd call it on Saturday. And instead of closing at 5 or 6, whatever their normal time was, they stayed open till 10 o'clock.
And you had to be there.
And I had to be there. So, boy, when I got to bed after Goldblatt's on Saturday, having not been in bed since Thursday night,
Oh, my God.
man, was I tired.
Forgot why you were there to begin with.
And I would sack out in that little cot thing until the next morning. And then I would wake up groggily and start getting organized to do my homework that I had to do for these practice sets for bookkeeping and so forth. And Betty, God bless her, she would leave her fancy place, the girl in fancy place, the Bethany Girls Club on Sunday, sometime in the forenoon or noontime, buy a Sunday paper, come down to that crummy hotel, come up to that room, sit on the side of that cot, read the paper, keep me company while I did homework. And once in a while we would splurge over the theater, pretty regularly we did. There was a movie theater over on Wabash Avenue, and they had double and, believe it or not, triple headers for 15 cents a piece. I
And of
remember
course,
very
you
well.
could stay awake for that.
And we would go over there
Couldn't say
and
what
see a
happened to
movie
No.
for 15 cents. Two or three movies for 15 cents. That was our entertainment day with that whole damn season, the whole year. That was our dating. And then when it came out, she'd get on a streetcar and ride off back up to Bethany Girl Club. I think she had to check in by 10 o'clock. And
They probably
they were
had
very
like a
religious.
room mother, what do you call it?
House mother.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And no men were allowed above the
Oh, no, she was
parlor
just
area,
living in a women's
except up
dwelling.
on the roof. You could go up, you could take your date up on the roof.
No,
But that was all. But anyway, I never got to go up there with her because went back to bed. Went right to bed, and she'd go off up to, she'd go home. So that's what we did that year. Then in spring, I'd finished. I did accumulate the $152 for the next 20 weeks, and in June or July, I'd finished that. Now I'm halfway through, and I had enough that I went looking for an accounting job, and I got a job at Hertz Drive Yourself, which was then a wholly owned sub of General Motors at 9 West Kinsey. And I got a job, there's a cost department accounting clerk. And I was processing paperwork and kind of the jack of all trades. I was having to chauffeur once in a while, doing very kind of things. That was my first job. And when fall came, instead of going back to school full time, I kept that job, and I enrolled in night classes to finish out my degree, whatever they called it, from Walton, and to qualify. What it did was qualify me to sit for the Illinois CPA exam. So I spent the next 2 years in night school and working first for Hertz, and then switched to a small public accounting firm. But that's enough of me. I'm off of the track from the Maddies. And anyway, we got through that. And after I began working full time, then Betty's still living up at Bethany, and I finally moved out of there and got a little one-room place up on the near north side. Once I was on a salary for $100 a month, by the way, and and we even bought a car, an old used '37 DeSoto Coupe from a finance company, and repossessed car, and we drove that out to Iowa on Labor Day weekend, and on August the 30th, we drove all night to Kirkville, Missouri, where it didn't have any waiting, no nothing. We got there. In the morning, the courthouse opened at 9 o'clock. I went in and got a license, and got instructions that there was a barber. There was also the JP, and I went over there. In the meantime, we got in a room in a little hotel on the square in Kirkville, and Betty was changing clothes from the travel clothes, and she got into what we called her oatmeal dress. I'll never forget that
That
dress.
was her wedding dress?
Yeah, that was her wedding
Do
dress.
you have a picture?
She got was kind of an oatmeal-y looking thing, and I
That
thought
was
she
her
was
good
beautiful.
dress, yeah.
Beautiful. So anyway, while she's doing that, while I'm getting a marriage license, and they had to get her to sign it too. Then went to the barber shop, and the fellow finished cutting hair. Went to his house. His wife served one witness, and they got a neighbor lady come in for the second witness, and they married us right there in Kirkville.
So you eloped?
We piled into the car
I know that.
and drove up to Soap Creek, where south of Ottumwa there, where my parents lived, and gave them the good news, and then we drove on up to Oskaloosa and gave Fanny the good
Told
news.
Fanny.
And
I gotta
What's
ask a
Granny
question.
say?
I always thought the Maddies were very much. I thought Dean and Lois pretty much paid for Betty's way, but it seems like
No, they help support their mother, right?
their mother Fanny, because it
Yeah,
seems like
right.
Betty wasn't
Well-
okay. She wasn't well-to-do, but she was
Who was this?
Betty.
oh, Betty
Betty?
had a job
Oh,
in
no.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Just
She
the
had a
way you told the
job.
story, it made me think that Betty was more well-off than.
More well off than he was.
Okay.
It's
all relative,
Yeah,
in
it's
other
all
words.
relative.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I'm
also
gonna,
by
I'm
the
gonna, I'm
time
gonna edit that part of the tape.
when the kids were little, I mean, Loie and Ben turned over a substantial portion of their income just to help
support
support
Fanny.
the family.
Yeah.
But the time he's talking about, by then, everybody was adult and
Except for
self-supporting.
and they were.
But Betty went to
That's
Chicago.
right,
She
and
had a
the
job
Fanny was
then.
still-
She was working.
Fanny-
Was
Yeah,
Fanny,
she was
had
supported
Fanny's
herself.
husband
Fanny was
passed?
still working.
Oh, yeah, a long time.
He had died in 1921.
When Betty was what, an infant?
She was an
4.
orphan.
That's when
Four.
you were
Yeah,
born
right.
in
Born in
1921.
17, their father died
Right.
in 21. Same year I was born.
But
Betty
she
probably
was
wouldn't
working as a
remember her
secretary in
father.
Chicago.
Oh,
when she
no.
was at the
Yeah.
Girls Club, so she had a
No,
good
she
job
didn't
and a
remember her
decent
father.
salary.
Pandemic.
But anyway,
Yeah.
that,
She was
Nancy
flu.
so that's the way that's the way I married into the Maddy family,
Well, she was the
and we went back to Chicago, and we lived in little one-room places, paying $5-6 a week, and on the near north side in Chicago, an old
Now-
brownstones which has been converted.
Were Peg and Bob still in Chicago at this time? then?
Peg and Bob, no, but this time Bob had finished Northwest Dental School and had started his practice out in Geneva. And we'd go out there and visit them. That's what we did a lot on the weekends. We'd drive out. First we went out by train on the old Royal Elgin electric train. But then after we bought this old DeSoto coupe, we would drive out there, and that's where we had when Ann was born, and she was christened there. I think I was telling somebody earlier today. One of Peg's dear friends from her days at Meyercourt was Ada Westrate, a tough spinster lady who raised a nephew. She had no children. She never married. She had a nephew that she raised, and she was a tough gal. And when Robin was christened,
And
when Ann was christened in the Episcopalian church, and Ada Westrate was godmother, and the Episcopalian priest goes through the rituals, gets to that part where he's telling what the godparents' duties are, and he says, now, and you renounce the devil. Well, Ada was not happy. After the ceremony, and she wasn't kidding, after the ceremony, she took Peg to task. She said, I've never agreed to this, but I have no intention of renouncing the devil. And of course, Peg explained to her, look, don't get upset, Ada, because you're renouncing the devil for the child. You don't have to renounce it for yourself. Ada Westrate, she was a tough
She was
gal.
a character.
She liked to
But
drink.
now-
She was a good character.
Give us years. The year that you and Betty were born was,
I was born in 21,
or
Betty
not
was
born,
17,
married.
Yeah.
married.
41,
okay,
2 years
August
before you were
30th,
even born.
1941.
right,
Oh, okay. And
August
my
30th,
parents were married in
1940.
38, so.
okay.
Yeah.
How did Oskaloosa, Fran, and her, Lois and Ben, were they thrilled? Were Lois
Lois
and
was
Ben happy that you were
thrilled.
Oh,
married?
yeah.
Fran
Yeah.
not so?
I had no problem. Yeah, well, in all fairness to Fanny, you can't blame her. Here she is. She's struggling to raise her children, her baby daughter, this love child that came. Fanny was in her 40s when Betty was born.
And how old was Betty when their father died?
4. And here, you know, you can't blame Fanny because I had no prospects. I had barely high school education. I was nothing. And I can understand her concern. And I was not, most of the polish I got from Betty.
But you were goal-oriented.
But
Yeah, and you were hardworking, and why did Lois think you were the best thing for Betty?
well, I don't know. I hope that.
Lois always had a soft spot for him.
No, but you don't
Anyway,
have to be modest.
whatever. It's all academic now.
But what did they
Whatever.
say?
But I just, in
Okay.
all fairness to Fanny's memory, I want to know that as brokenhearted as I was with that dear John letter, and her, because I knew she had never approved of me as a prospect for a son-in-law. See, I was a teenager and her daughter was in her 20s. In first place, I was 4 years younger. At that time, that's quite a difference in age. So you can't blame Fanny for being unsure about it. And I was a pretty raunchy guy, and remember we used to on dates. We didn't do anything much on dates because there was no money.
Yeah.
A big date was to go to Niswanger's and have a fountain Coke,
Yeah.
cherry Coke or chocolate
For
Coke.
how much?
And they were a dime.
Yeah.
But the big deal was they had a beautiful pork tenderloin sandwich. But with the pork tenderloin sandwich and the Coke was 40 cents. So man, that was a big time date when you had that
Yeah,
kind of
you
a
were
date.
serious.
That was a big time date when you had
I
that.
want
She's
to
still
know,
getting that?
okay, when you went to Fanny and you and Aunt Betty said you were married, what did Fanny say?
I don't know what she said.
You were on the front porch.
It's fait accompli. I think that she probably probably said little or nothing.
Okay.
You know, she's accepted as fait
Yeah.
accompli. She was a grand lady in that
Yeah.
way. There's no point in fussing about it. If something is done, and she's going to make the best of it. And we got along fine, and we immediately started helping support her.
Yeah, I
Because
know.
by this time she'd retired, and so we all, as much little as we had, we'd spend. I think we started off sending $5 a month, and then raised it up as later as time went on. And no, she was very nice. The only thing that Fanny ever did that kind of hurt a little was just before she died. When John was born in July 29th, and she died a couple months later.
She died. She must have died weeks
July
later.
29th.
Weeks
She
or
died July 29th,
He was born July
1948.
29th.
And we came back for the funeral. It was summer. It was warm weather
yeah.
when we came back for the funeral. So it, couldn't have
Couldn't have
been
been
very
more
long.
than a month. But in that short period, she did do one thing that kind of hurt a little. Was she expressed concern that now that I had a son, I would kind of forget I had a daughter.
As if that was going to happen.
Not in your lifetime, Connie.
That was really
Interesting.
All you
that
have to
kind of
say is
hurt
as
because
if,
it
yeah.
never occurred to me when Connie was born. The
Interesting.
fact she was a girl, that didn't mean anything to me. I mean, as a child, you love you got your first child. Hey, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
Isn't life wonderful?
She didn't know you.
You know, I just,
Yeah.
you know, we
John is the last of the 16 first cousins.
Yeah.
And he was the first boy since
yeah, for a
He
long
was the
time.
only boy.
Since
No,
Bruce.
The very
Bruce.
first.
Well, they
No,
had,
Rex.
Well, no.
Rex
Tim,
and Mike and Tim.
right, Mike and Tim
Rex
met.
Jack
Mike and
Mike
Tim
Tim.
met.
Oldest, right?
But Tim was
Tim was
a
John's
year
age.
older. He was a year older than John.
Yeah.
And
Otherwise,
Mike was
all
my
girls.
age. But I don't know.
But of the Maddie girls, see, all the Maddie girls had nothing but girls.
when she was a little girl.
Betty was the first one to deliver
I don't
a
know.
grandson.
Yeah.
John.
So there was something special about it, and but you know, it's fun. Instead of she worried about me, I worried about her. Anyway, if anything, you know, that was just a little thing. But you know, you forget about those things; those aren't important. So anyway, she would be so proud of all of you.
She would be so proud of you, Jim. She
Oh,
would.
You know,
she was.
forget about- She'd be so proud of all of you.
Did
And all your
Fanny
children
have
and
brothers?
your grandchildren, her great-grandchildren,
Thank you, Fanny.
and all you've done, all grown up into responsible adults. And maybe you had some wayward ways along the line, sure. Didn't we all? Didn't we all? And things we weren't too proud of later. So, that's the,
Yeah.
He's already got something. He's
Yeah,
not
one
worried
other thing.
about.
Forrest has a question. Forrest, speak up, honey. Raise your hand.
Okay.
Raise your hand.
One of the things that my mother always
Really
talked
great.
about,
We want it on tape.
Forrest.
I just want
Okay.
him on tape.
Forrest.
Go close up.
Forrest!
Don't.
Oh, you're not kidding.
Look at the other bald-headed guy in the room.
Okay, no, this is what you want. Smile.
Look at that, look at
The Family Guy keys. I'm sorry, he was just too cute to pass.
let me scrape my face with it.
The
Oh,
youngest.
The youngest.
Okay,
relative
question.
here,
We have a question.
Connie had a statement also.
Forrest had a question, but no one can understand.
any brothers?
Oh, that was Robin. Fanny have any brothers?
Yeah.
Fanny? No, as far as I can remember, Fanny had a half-sister, but I don't know of any other siblings. There might have been, but you'd have to go back to us Maddies, you might be
Yeah.
able to find.
Was Aunt Maddie the half sister?
that happened to her when she
Aunt Maddie, Aunt Maddie was, Aunt Maddie was her sister.
Full sister?
Yeah, full sister. Aunt Maddie was a full sister.
Okay.
She was the mother of Ray Wallace and Pauline, Dorothy rather. Ray, Dorothy, and Mary. Mary was the oldest.
What was she,
Dorothy and
Madeline
then
Maddy?
Ray or Junior.
I no, wasn't her name Maddie? It was like Fanny was a name then, Maddie was a name. It wasn't a nickname.
Yeah, what was,
Fanny is her given name.
Was
It's not
Fanny-
Francis,
was
it's Fanny.
given-
Yeah.
Her
And
name-
Aunt Maddie was Maddie, right? That's a given name.
Yeah, Maddie. Maddie, Aunt Maddie.
Well, that's, I always get that, 'cause Maddie is my middle name, and people always think
honey,
it's
your middle name
Maddie.
is
Maddie.
No,
I know, it's Maddie, but people always think that I'm abbreviating my middle name of Madeline to Maddie.
But Aunt Maddie was
Why would I have a nickname
M-A-T-T.
for my middle name?
But she was
confusing.
Yes, no, I'm sorry.
No, she wasn't a Maddie. She was Franny Park's sister.
Yeah.
She was
Oh,
Maddie
Parks,
Parks.
that's right, Maddie Parks, okay.
Maddie Parks married Wallace and moved to Homestead in Oklahoma. And they had 3 children. Mary, who had a very, she
Mary Wallace, yeah.
Mary Wallace.
Okay.
She married, and her husband was killed in an automobile accident within a year or something like that. She never remarried. She became very successful working for an wildcatter in Oklahoma, and she was an accountant and a very beautiful woman. She never remarried. And the second one was Dorothy. She married a big wheat farmer family in Oklahoma. They had thousands of acres, and he unfortunately was something of a rounder. And but she died of breast cancer, I think it was, in her about 40. And Mary died, I think, of cancer also. Peg went out to stay with Mary when she was dying, I remember. Remember that? And Mary was, was something kind of, she came and kind of took shine to me a bit because being an accountant. And also, after I had attained some level of success in that field, she was very proud to say that their accountants, some firm out in Oklahoma, knew of me. And the reason they knew of me because I had written a book for the American Institute of CPAs, which is the national professional organization of CPAs. I'd written a text manual for a course, and it was given by the state CPA chapters around the country. And in fact, most of them wanted me to conduct this 3-day course. Of course, I couldn't do it for all states, but I did do it for a half a dozen states, including one I did 2 in Texas, one in East Texas, the one in West Texas, and the one in West Texas. The accounting firm that her oil exploration company used, their accountants attended the one that I conducted in Lubbock. I think, was it in Lubbock? I conducted that, and I can't remember for sure. I believe it was. But anyway, so we had Mary. She visited us in Chicago and stayed with us. We remember we took her to dinner at the Palmer House, and she was really impressed by that. We drove down into Chicago and took her dinner at the Palmer House, which was one of the grand places to eat in Chicago in those days. And when Mary was visiting us. So Dorothy I met only in '39 when Dorothy and Maddy, their mother, and Ray drove up from Oklahoma to Oskaloosa in a 1935 Ford Business Coupe. And boy, how 3 adults could drive that far in that little car, I don't know. Because the Ford Business Coupe was a mighty small car. But Lois and their family drove from Oskaloosa down to Oklahoma in that 29 Model A Ford too.
Wow.
And that was Lois's car, that 29 Ford. And it sat in the garage after Fanny retired. Sat in the garage, and I always kind of dreamed of maybe getting to own it. Yeah, but the battery was dead. Sat there, and after Fanny retired, your mother sold it. Because it belonged to your mother. Yeah. And your mother sold it. So, the story on that it had nothing to do with the Maddies, except that Betty was involved. When in 1941, when we decided it was time to get a car, I went down South Broadway, and I found a 1936 Chevrolet Coupe, and it was a beauty. And the price was like $165 or something like that. I forget what it was. Something in that. So I put down a $15 deposit and was going to get the financing for the rest of it and so forth. But when I came back, it was one of these bait and switch deals. And this guy says, he said, I'm sorry, the salesman made a mistake. That car isn't available at that price. It's like $265. Well, that was, of course, ridiculous. I couldn't afford that. And so they said, but he made a mistake because it's this 36 Chevy over here that is $165. So I went at the over here Chevy. Well, they were the same year, but the over here Chevy had a tough life. and of course I was young and foolish, didn't know any better, and they didn't want to give me the car that I thought I had bought, and they didn't want to give me my $15 back, and
So you went for the.
I grabbed that manager by the front of his shirt, and that shirt came up, and drew back, and I said, "You SOB, you give me the $15 or you're going to get a knuckle sandwich." And he gave me the $15.
So you didn't buy the car.
They still didn't have the car you wanted at that
No.
price.
So then I went down the street, and there's Winter and Hirsch, which was a finance company, and they had this soda sitting on the lot. Didn't look too bad. And so I went in.
The kids
and
don't know what a DeSoto is.
I do.
Was a Chrysler
You're not a
product.
kid, John.
Chrysler product.
My grandmother drove a DeSoto.
Yeah, it's a Chrysler product, a notch up
I
from
drive
Dodge.
a Chrysler product down.
Chrysler made Plymouth, Dodge, DeSoto,
Yeah.
Chrysler. And this was just the top of the So anyway, a lot of them were taxi cab, very popular for many years. Sodas were used heavily, taxi cabs. Anyway, so this one looked all right, and it seemed to run all right, so I bought it. We bought it, and we paid, I don't know, $20 or $30 down or something. And then we signed papers for financing and insurance and stuff that added up to where it was a lot more than the original price was, but that was the way. So we didn't buy it. But then we drove it. We went out to Peg's, and we had trouble with
Where was
overheating.
that? Where was that? In
Geneva?
Geneva.
Geneva, okay.
And we went out to there, and we had trouble with the overheating. So I put some radiator cleaner stuff in the radiator, cleaned out. I thought everything was going to be all right. So Labor Day weekend, we started for Lancaster, Missouri on Friday night after work. We get just about to the edge of Chicago and it overheats again. Well, that was the beginning of a misery. That's why it took us all night to make the 300 miles, because that thing would overheat. And in the middle of the wee hours of the morning, I'm going to the farmyards, scraping up, wondering I didn't get shot. Find a bucket and get to a pump some water. And that old thing was so hot. I got so mad at it, and I'd run as long as it was run. But we finally got to Lancaster about 8 o'clock in the morning. And which solved something in a way, because we got there early. It had been a problem, because we had to check in the motel. We weren't married yet. We can't do, in those days, we didn't do those things. So, after we were married and we drove up to my parents, just south of Tumwa's Creek there, I told Dad what my problems were. I said, I can't figure it out. I said, I cleaned out the radiator and everything, and I said, it seems to be fine, but damn it, it keeps getting. He said, it's one of three things. Could be a cracked block, could be a cracked head, and if you're real lucky, it's just a blown head gasket. Says what's happening is, it isn't boiling over and boiling the radiator dry. What's happening is compression is leaking into the water system, blowing the water out the overflow pipe, and then it's overheating because there's no water left in it. So that wasn't that much of a mechanic, but he said that's, what you do is pull in. So we went on up to Oskaloosa, filled up the radiator, we made it that far. And I went into Lamberson Motors there and gritted my teeth because I thought, well, this is going to cost money. And so it was Saturday, but they pulled the head off, and sure enough, there's a copper gasket, copper with asbestos in between the head and the block, and there's holes in that for the water to go through in the water chamber outside the cylinders. Then of course there's a big cylinders, holes in the center. Well, between the big hole where the cylinder is, where the compression is, and the water jacket hole, one place in the copper, which was that nice shiny copper color, was one place where there was like a lead pencil, a gray line across there. And took one look at it and knew that was a problem. Because what was happening is when the piston would come up on the compression stroke, compression would leak through there into the water jacket, and that compression would make bubbles in the water, and it would make it go out over the overflow. So all I had to do was buy a new head gasket, but unfortunately, running it overheated all that way warped one of the valves, and so that 6-cylinder DeSoto became a 5-cylinder.
It ran though.
Yeah, I got it back, and then I traded it in on the blue Buick, which when I went in the service,
Ben bought that.
I sold it to Ben.
I remember that. I don't remember the sales. I don't think
You drove it all
but
during
I
the
remember
war.
the car.
What do you
We had
remember about
pictures.
it?
I think I only remember pictures of it.
Oh,
It's a beautiful
Your
car.
own personal Holden story from
But I don't know what more I can tell you about the Maddy. You got me way off track
One
there.
thing I
Bob.
remember about the Palmer House is one time Mom and Betty and I were in Chicago, and Mom wanted to stay at the YWCA for $2 a night. Betty said, "No, we're going to the Palmer House." So that's what we did.
Yeah, the Palmer, that had, what was the name of that main dining room? It was
Pump room.
No, that was
Was
at
it?
the,
Oh, that was
at the Ambassador East.
Ambassador East, that's right.
Palmer House was the Empire Room, wasn't it?
Was it?
I think it was the Empire, that was,
Very
that
elegant.
was the big
Yeah.
The place.
dining room in downtown, Chicago.
What was the show when we came to visit you in Chicago? What was the show we went to see? Was that The King and I, Jane? Or was it?
I don't know.
What was the what?
The King and I?
So we went to see, was it theater or movie?
King and I was mostly on the stage, and
It was
Yeah.
a musical.
Musical, okay.
it was on the stage all over, and it was also in the movie. We saw The King and I on the stage a couple times.
Yeah, I think it was one.
Last time we saw it was at Sunrise Theater in Fort Lauderdale, just months times.
It was his 1,000th performance.
Was
Yeah,
it?
Wow.
it was a great show.
Said you get who you were.
And Jim, I have to tell you, the refrigerator that you and Betty bought for us for our, when we learned about our marriage, is still working. We're still using it.
Really?
Yeah.
And so is the marriage.
42 years old, yes. Yeah,
My
41,
God.
42 years old, yes.
Refrigerator.
It's our second
I think
refrigerator.
everyone else probably knows the answer to this, but when Mom was born and she and B. Graham were living with Fanny, there were a lot of other people living there. Who were they?
Oh.
Peg,
Yes, Peg, me,
Robin, no,
Jane.
Robin wasn't
No, Robin.
born yet.
Ann.
Jane and Ann.
Jane, Ann, and Peg were living there. And then when I came home to see Connie for the first time as a baby, she was about 2-3 months old. Peg thought she had labor pains, and they got me up in the night, and the soda that they had, and I drove Peg to the Oskaloosa Hospital, but it turned out to be false labor, and I went back the next morning and picked her up again, brought her home. Then I went back, reported back to duty, so I went overseas, and that was sometime between August 2nd and sometime in August, because Connie was just a baby, a very new baby, and then Ann was born.
Oh, Robin.
Robin was born in October,
Right.
so
It seemed like there were a lot of people there because all the sisters were around with their
it was
children.
such
They
a
all
little
had
house
babies,
too.
yeah.
Pictures of so many little girls. And
Where did Fran live at that point?
They lived east of town there on the farm.
Mother used to say when, I remember, and especially when Peg was visiting, and they get to talking about how much fun they had during that period at home and how they would feel very badly sometimes about how much fun they were having by
Yeah.
themselves. But one of the big things was that because of all the babies in the house, they had a very large sugar ration, comparatively speaking.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they could get a fair amount of sugar. And my mother's story on her older sister, Peg, was that they saved their sugar ration to make fudge. And they got the ingredients together and they were making a pan of fudge. But Peg was one of those, if a little is good, a little more must be better kinds of cooks. And so the recipe they had for fudge called for 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. And Peg thought that
why not half?
1/2 teaspoon of cream of tartar. And so they had their entire saved sugar ration
In that fudge.
in that fudge with the extra 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, which for those of you who aren't candy cooks,
No, I don't know.
let me tell you, means that the fudge came out hard as a rock instead of nice and chewy. And I have to tell you that 40 years later, my mother had not forgiven Peg for that.
Speaking of the crowd in the house, that little house, that reminds me, when I was home I was home on furlough from the Air Force before I went overseas that time. And here is all these little kids in the house, and with all that laundry to do, and that house did not have a real hot water system. It had a furnace that had an old coil type thing in the furnace. So in the wintertime, if you had a roaring fire in the furnace, you had some warm water for a bath maybe. But that's the only hot water in the house. And of course you couldn't buy hot water heaters. And I was home on furlough, and I got to look in the Oskaloosa Herald, and I found an ad in there. Somebody had a hot water heater, a gas heater for sale, used. So I went to look at it, and I bought it. It was one of the old hand-lighted type. It was a tube about so big, and it had a gas burner down at the bottom, and it had a coil for water to flow through, and it piped out at the top and the bottom. And the cold water came in, and it was heated and went up, but you had to hand light that gas burner, turn on the gas, and then stick a match in there. So I bought that, and I think I paid like some tremendous amount of money. I think I paid $24 is what comes to mind. And that was a lot of money. I bought the $24. We had it installed, plumbed into the water system, and the stories that got after that was that they had hot water when they wanted it for the laundry for all these kids. But they also had a lot of singed eyebrows from lighting the heater.
Oh, you don't have to plug.
So I don't know whether that was replaced with one after the war or not. I expect it was.
Now, I don't know if you are done, but I just want to know if anybody had any questions that they wanted
Wow, I wish
answered.
Some of them.
I want the full
Jim's
history of the
somebody?
Maddy family, which I know you might not remember since Jamestown, but
Well, you get I haven't even tried to go into the old Maddy family, because the best source of that information is the us Maddies.
us Maddies.
I'm talking about my Maddies, the Maddies that I knew, and the Maddy, and I just want you to all know how I knew and felt about your parents, those of you who were Betty's siblings, and I just wish that Pete's and Dean's could have been here, and friends, but they're, for various reasons. And also a little sad that Ann and none of her children are here, because Ann was one of the first one that was the first grandchild of that group of the daughters. Well, she wasn't either.
Nita and Winnie.
Winnie was Nita was the first really, but and that was kind of. I don't know if there was a difference in the relationship.
Right, and the contemporaries.
Anyway, that's the story of things as I remember it.
when was the Us Maddies book published? What
Sometime in the 40s.
Well,
so
it
there's
had,
a lot of updating.
I would guess about 1950 because John's birth is in there, 1948.
There's
And-
a picture of you in there on a tricycle.
It has ages of people.
And
I've seen the book. I just didn't know when it ended.
I remember finding John, and trying to find if there was anybody younger than John in it. And I don't remember what I found, but I would say it was. Yeah, but John was 48, so he's 4 years younger than Robin and me. So I think that
So
my
everyone
guess
after
is
that is-
49, 50 is when it was
That's right.
published.
I would
Everyone
say,
after that is a write-in.
Yeah,
because-
basically, yeah.
Because Aunt Ollie retired about the time we were married, roughly, and she spent 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
When did Aunt Ollie die? you remember?
Oh, way before,
I remember her.
Aunt Florence died after I was married. And she,
Yeah, but Aunt Olive.
Aunt Ollie died
Are
way
these
before
siblings
that.
of
Right. But she must have died in the early
Florence and Ollie.
50s sometime.
Yeah.
Ollie
Ollie
was
was a sibling of Clint, who was Fanny's
Died.
She was Grandpa's sister.
Okay.
She died in the 50s, I would say.
Oh yeah, you saw. I drew out a family tree.
died
and
after
so
Grandma
I have a
Maddy,
very good
right?
idea right now of.
Yeah, she died after
Certain
Grandma
people.
Maddy.
Yeah.
Because after Grandma Maddy, after Fanny Maddy sold her house, she moved in with Olive Maddy. And they shared Olive's house.
I was 5 when Grandma Maddie died, so that was 1948, right?
Yeah, it was 48 when John
Is that right? So
That's when
I
John
was,
was born,
I
right?
was 6.
Yeah. And we,
So, who's the volunteer with publishing capacities to do the second
Us
edition of the
Maddy's
Us Maddy's?
Juniors. Us Maddy's Juniors.
Well, I
So who of the 3 cousins here? Who is the?
I'm the
but
oldest.
the,
oh, we're gonna
Oh,
go
she'd be the
there.
fourth.
the real,
No. I'm curious
The real
because I
hero
know your
of this-
sisters. It's Lois and
It
then
goes Jane,
Peg and then
Connie, Robin,
Betty.
right?
the real hero of
Okay.
this last 2 nights is my dear sweet Betty, that's been sitting over there, listening patiently, bored probably with all of this. But I love her very much. I've been twice blessed.
You have.
Oops, all of a sudden, the baby's
That's right.
resolved.
And let's hear that from some of you because
Okay,
Wait, what do we want to hear?
she's received.
how
Gosh, we love Betty.
Betty?
important Betty
Oh,
is.
we love her.
Absolutely.
Since the day we met you, I think I was 12, 13,
Everybody in
14.
the family is the most wonderful thing.
I wanted to know,
Everybody.
Yeah,
Do you
you're
have a
not the
copy?
only lucky one, the rest of us are because of her.
do you have a copy of the Maddy story? I've never seen
I
it.
don't know our family.
Gwen has one.
Alec has us.
Alex got our
The Us
family.
Maddy?
John may have, or John has it. John or Alec has it.
Robin, do you have ours or does
Is
Ann
that Us
have it?
Maddies?
I think Ann has.
Be the next
Can
generation.
we have somebody to
I know
scan
them
the
too.
whole thing?
It's
No,
so
digital
thick.
copy.
It's a huge thing.
It's like
It would
this
have to be
thick.
You have to,
republished.
yeah.
It's a hit.
I'll fly to. I'll
We
fly.
could
Okay.
get the pages that,
Fine.
that
I
relate
will
to
fly
our
to
branch.
Hawaii
And get Alex's
and
copy.
scan it.
Okay,
I'll
and
stay
by the
there.
way, they'll have the guest room finished in another month.
Then I will
Yeah.
take it upon
If you
myself.
pay for airfare, Liz, I'll go.
Family duty.
What?
I'll go to Hawaii. You
But
know I know.
there's another thing I want to say. I felt very blessed in that the way the Maddy family took me in, all of them. Lois probably is kind of special in some way, but they became my family,
Oh, yeah.
and I just felt at home and ease with everyone and all our home was all wonderful. And the amazing thing is, when I married Betty Shanks, I had the same thing. The Shanks family have done the same thing. Our only sister, God bless her soul, died a few years ago, and all her brothers. To this day, we have a wonderful relationship. She has 2 surviving brothers, Jack in Texas, and Ozzy, who's my age up in Canada. Matter of fact, he's just a few months older than I am. His birthday's in June, isn't it? Okay, Ozzy's 85 in June, and I always call him on his birthday, and I say, Ozzy, wait right there. I'll join you on October the 3rd. Well, the first time I did this, I thought nothing about it, but he misunderstood me, and he thought we were coming up there. I said, Ozzy, no way you're going to get me to Canada in October.
That's like going in December.
But Ozzy's a wonderful guy. Jack's a wonderful guy, and Betty's brother.
Oh, Ontario in October is
Cold.
fine.
Yeah, but
Guys,
Carl. Betty had
we're not
Stan,
talking
youngest brother Stan, who died several years ago. He was one of the first to die. Stan, when I look at Pete, Maddy, and think about it, is so much like him. Don't particularly look alike, but they were both charming salespeople. It was just the same personality, that outgoing, charming sales personality, and that's what he was. He was a salesman, damn salesman, plus a good cook. We had a, he was a good time. He was a good drink. He had his faults. He had his clay feet. So don't we all? But and he has three boys, and all of them are wonderful boys. And even that generation, except me, kind of feel at home with them as family. They all live in Canada. So I have a wonderful relationship with all of them. And I think tonight when they had the duck, one year, Stan and Lois, that was his wife, and she died about a year ago. Stan and Lois were visiting us in Florida, and I went over to the store, and what did I find but fresh, not frozen, fresh Long Island duckling. So I bought 2 ducks. I took them home, and I said, Stan, we're going to cook tonight. Betty and Lois are banned from the kitchen. So
And trash the kitchen.
we took those 2 ducks. Stan, I put Stan in charge. He was the fancy cook, so I said, you make the Lori's sauce for him. I'll take care of the ducks. So I got the ducks ready. I cleaned them out real good, and I stuffed each of them with an with an onion and an apple, and I put them in the oven to roast. And then Mary Ellen Mastori's a dear friend of ours, I don't even know. Every year she'd send me some genuine wild rice. I mean the real stuff from the swamps of upper Minnesota. And so I got some of that wild, and that takes a whole afternoon to cook that, you know. So I'm cooking the wild rice, and I was roasting the ducks, and Stan is making his concoction of the sauce. So we get it all done. I throw out the onions and the apples, of course, and I split the ducks in half, and I put them on the 4 plates. Stan's got his hot sauce all ready, and we served it at that round table, which we still got on our patio at Harbor's Edge now, outside, and the ladies are sitting out there waiting for it. We set it out there and put these plates down in front of them, with the big helping of this wild rice, half a duck, and we had a bottle of Calvados that Betty and I had picked up at Amarici's, France. That previous trip, summer or sometime, we'd been to France, and I picked up this bottle of Calvados, and we were visiting the D-Day landing area. I still had some, so I liberally poured Calvados over. Stuck a match to it. We have a videotape to see the blue flame going up, burning the grease off of that crispy duck skin. And we had the duck dinner that was the piece de resistance. Oh, what a dinner that was.
Good for you.
Stan and I fixed it. He was a wonderful guy. The poor guy died at a very young age. He developed Alzheimer's and had a terrible ending. But it was he 69 when he died, Betty? And he was a very charming and wonderful guy. Betty and her sister had it was kind of a very close relationship that the Maddy sisters had. I'd say more closely like, well, I don't know which ones to say, but but anyway, it was a very wonderful sister, as only sisters can have. And she developed cancer and unfortunately died far too young. She was younger. And so now all that's left is Betty and Jack and Ozzy, but they're all my family.
Can I take a 1-minute break?